This week was a little different, and I shared a little bit in cross-training with you for those of you who are in there, but it's been a spiritual battle for me in the sense that I was going to war for the church and the message, the truth that was being preached, and how there's so many that are wavering from the truth, that gospel message that was just sung about, and how many are falling away. It seems the longer we go, the more I hear of people who are falling away from the Lord and who are putting their trust in other things. And so I was truly going to battle spiritually about this. I was praying about it. I was listening to preachers and sermons and stuff like that. And it was just one of those things where my heart felt not hard. My heart felt sorrowful for what was going on. And I was just going to battle. And a lot of that I kind of shared in cross-training with you. And I found myself, and if you've never preached before, it is hard for a preacher to come to Friday and not have a direction. And that's where every time I was trying to come with the direction on my own, I was trying to muster something up, I just kept going back to my cross-training lesson. And I kept just going back, and I'm like, no, that's not what I'm supposed to be preaching on. It's not. And so panic started coming into my life. Because come Friday afternoon, I normally like to have my outline done, and that way I can just review it and go over it and add certain things as the Lord leads me. But by Friday afternoon, I was like, oh boy, oh boy, what's going on? And so, like always, my wife reminded me the Lord is faithful. He will give you something. Just keep seeking Him out. Don't try to build it yourself. Just keep seeking Him out. And so that's what I would do. I would listen to worship music. I would not listen to worship music, not do anything. I actually, at one point, I locked myself in my office closet where it was dark. And I'm like, I'm getting rid of all distractions and just sitting in there. And probably somebody would have thought I was weird if they would have been here and I just come out of my office, closet. But I truly just wanted to know what the Lord was speaking. And come Friday afternoon, He started laying this topic on my heart. And I even battled it once it came to my heart because I'm like, wow, I've kind of touched on it in the past. But I just kept coming back to this. And so the title of my sermon is Before the Battle. And the songs that were sung, hopefully the message is the same as you hear every preacher that comes up behind this pulpit. You will hear the same message. All the songs that we sing, you will hear the same message. And again, it's pointing to Jesus Christ. But I've never been in a physical battle before. I've never been in war. I've never joined the army. I actually have never even been in a physical fight other than with my brothers growing up. And so I don't know a lot as it has to do with the physical side of things, what the mental preparation and all that kind of stuff has to take place. It was one of those weird things even in high school. I never got in verbal disputes or anything like that. I kind of was just, the behind-the-scenes type person. I just wanted to get by. In school, I wanted to do good, get good grades, and that was what I was going to school for. I wasn't going there to pick fights or anything like that. And so for me, when it comes to physical battle, I don't know what all the preparation looks like before a battle happens. But spiritually, I do know. And it's because every single person that is born on this earth, Old Testament, New Testament, present day, every single person that is born on this earth has a nature to sin. There is this sinful nature that wells up within us. And so there is a spiritual battle that is going on every single day of our lives. I know that after Friday, when this message was dropped on my heart, that it is for somebody in this room. It could be for multiple people in this room. And so just listen in case that person's you. And everybody, if everybody listens, then somebody will get it. So I know that even for me, this message just needs to be brought up time and time again. Almost on a daily basis, you need to be thinking about this process. what happens in my life before the battle. And we know that there is a spiritual battle going on, and I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to get into the answer. Of course, we already know the answer, but that's what I'm going to just continue to do, is point us to Jesus Christ. But the Bible makes it very clear that we have an enemy. And if we lose track or lose sight of that idea that there's warfare, spiritual warfare going on, then we will become complacent. We might become relaxed. We might let down our guard for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 6 weeks, 3 years, whatever it may be. And so I believe that it is put in the Bible for a reason, that we have an enemy that is going to war for our souls. And there's a couple of scriptures, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. That is his mission. The whole mission of the enemy is to destroy. And I know there's been sermons in the past that I've preached that I talk about this. But he longs so bad to take our children out. He longs so bad to take your spouse out, your parents out, your students, your co-workers, your relatives, everybody. There is not one person on this earth that he does not have his crosshairs on. He is going to try everything in his power to destroy our lives, spiritually and physically. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. We're actually going over 1 Peter in cross-training, and we haven't got to this one yet, but it says, the enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. He's just looking. That's what he does all the time. He's just looking for people to take down. Most of us in this place know that, and we've heard sermons preached on it. But we need to constantly be reminded of the fact that we have an enemy. There is warfare happening. And some of you in this place are feeling the effects of it. You're feeling the weight of it. You're feeling torn down. You're feeling discouraged. And it's because the enemy has gained some ground, and he's pulling you down. This message is the easy one, right? No, it doesn't feel too late. A couple sermons ago, I preached. This was probably 2 or 3 months ago, but you might remember it if you don't go back and listen. But how Satan uses different lures to entice us. He's going to find out what triggers you, what your weakness is, and he's going to exploit that, and he's going to continually go after it. And guess what? If that lure doesn't work, he's going to change lures. He's going to try different tactics. Because again, while he is still on this earth, the enemy is going around looking for people to destroy. He's coming up with ways of tearing lives apart. He's coming up with ways of dragging people away from the gospel. We need to know that there is a battle that rages in every single person. Do not feel or do not think for one moment that you are exempt from the battle. There's going to be battle. There's going to be temptation. There's going to be stuff that continues in our life. Now, the only thing that will change is whether or not we have victory or whether we are defeated. And the only thing that can do that, or the only one who can bring that, is Jesus Christ. And so knowing that we have a battle that we have to face every single day of our lives, there should be things that we do as Christians, as people who long to stay away from the enemy, people who long to do away with his schemes. There's things that we have to do before the battle happens. Don't go into the battle. Don't go into each and every day just leaving it up to it is what it is. Whatever happens, when it comes, I'll try to attack and defend myself. There are things that the Bible tells us that we need to do before the battle even begins. And it's him. We need to go to him. I'm big into nature, and I've told you that several times. Growing up, I would watch nature shows, and one of the things that the enemy or a lion, it says, the enemy is like a lion seeking whom he may devour. One of the things that I found that lions do is they find one lion that just goes in for an anchor point. They find that weakness, which is normally behind the horns if it's like a buffalo or something. They go back to the very back, they jump on the back, and they dig their teeth in right by their spine as much as they can, and they anchor it down, they weigh it down, and the purpose of that is to wear them out so that, guess what? Death happens. And I'm telling you, there is an enemy that is doing that to our lives. He's trying so hard to anchor us down, to pull us down, to weigh us down. And I'm telling you, there is victory that can be found each and every day. We do not have to undergo his attacks. We have to go to the one who has victory over the one who is attacking us. Victory over Satan is our choice. And what I mean by that is it's your choice whether you go to the one who has already offered victory to you. There is victory, and that's why if we can get this in our hearts, if we can get this in our minds, and it becomes so real to us, we will do everything in our power to do what we are called to do, and that is to step into his presence on a daily basis, to carry his cross on a daily basis, to get connected to the vine on a daily basis, so that when, not if, but when the attacks come, victory is there. Not by strength, not by our power, but by him, says the Lord. Being the someone who is devoured in those scriptures in 1 Peter when it says the enemy goes around like a roaring lion seeking for someone to devour. You being that someone that the enemy attacks and brings down is your choice. You have heard the truth. I have heard the truth long enough. And trust me, there are days where I walk it out and I just get up and I say to myself, you know what? I'm doing good today. I'll go through life and we'll see what happens. And the enemy truly brings me down. The attacks come. I'm not prepared. I don't lean in on him. And there's a loss that happens. Here's what it boils down to. We cannot in our own strength win the battle. And I'm going to read lots of scripture towards the end of the sermon. But in our own strength, we cannot win this battle. Our natural tendency when it comes to fighting against evil is to do it on our own. I know that if I was to ever, get into a physical fight, a lot of times you're like, okay, this is the preparation I would go through. I better start lifting weights. I better make sure I have a better weapon than the enemy. I better make sure, I have a better strategy than the enemy. I got to make sure all these things are in line. Otherwise, I don't even want to, if it's death and life we're talking about, I am going to do everything in my power to make sure I'm going to have victory over the enemy. And when it comes to spiritual stuff, we get too relaxed. We get too comfortable. We don't understand that this is eternal life and death. The enemy wants death. Christ has offered victory and life. When we have difficulties, there's times where we try to fight it on our own. And I'm telling you, the answer is go to him before the battle happens. 1 Samuel chapter 17, I'm not going to actually read part of it right now. I'm going to come back because, it's just kind of how I was putting my sermon together. I'm like, I'm going to give them a snapshot of the story, and then I'll come back and finish it up at the end. So that's what I'm going to do. 1 Samuel chapter 17, a lot of us have heard this story before. I've heard it probably 100 times, no joke, and it's the story of David and Goliath. I heard it growing up as a kid. I was raised in the church. I heard it multiple times, and I've also read it a lot of times. So I've heard this story. I've read it. Probably most of you have heard this story. But there was this enemy, a Philistine soldier who was just this giant of a man, calling out to the army of Israel saying, pick one man to come out and fight me. And if you win, our army will be yours. If we win, we will take over and conquer you guys. And so here in the arena of the Philistines and the Israelites, there is a battle that is about to rage. There is a war that is about to happen. And guess who is the one who is already out there ready for battle? The enemy. It was the Christians or the Israelites who had not yet come to war yet. They were still standing there in fear, scared, sitting there on the sidelines, looking for someone who was tall enough, maybe strong enough, maybe not as smart as the other person to go out there and try, attacking this giant of a man. And so here you have this enemy calling out and defying the armies of the living God. When David came from watching sheep and said that he was willing to go out, look at what their natural tendency is to do. And I know this is a physical battle, but this is a spiritual battle. And you will see that later in the sermon. Look at what the natural tendency. Saul, first of all, was scared. Because looking physically at it, here's this giant of a man, and here's this boy. And you can actually see that, and we'll just read the story later, 1 Samuel chapter 17. But here's this boy coming and saying, I'll do it. And the next thing that Saul does is he starts throwing his own armor on this man. Physical stuff. We have to do everything in our power to overcome this battle. We have to do this. And so they start throwing his armor on, and it's not working out. Let me tell you, if David would have gone out by only the things that man thought would win the battle, it would have been lost. It would have been lost. Why? Because they were not putting their trust, the end of the story is they did, but they were not putting their trust in the one who truly was there and had the victory for them. He would have lost the battle. Judges chapter 7. I did a sermon about Gideon not too long ago. Judges chapter 7 is the story of Gideon. He was hiding in a winepress threshing wheat because there was an enemy that was looking to kill him. And guess who had the upper hand? The enemy. Here, the Israelites, again, are hiding. They're hiding because the Amalekites had come through and destroyed all their crops. They were doing everything to suppress the children of Israel. And their ultimate goal was wipe them out. The Amalekites, we're going to wipe them out. We're going to wipe out all of Israel. This people who have been such a thorn in our side, we're just going to do away with them. And so here you have a man named Gideon who is hiding in a wine press, threshing wheat, because of the fear that had overtaken them, the ability to try saving his own life. They're hiding. Well, guess what? God calls him out. God tells him that he is the man that is going to lead. And guess what his first response is? Gather the troops. We're going to war. The first time, and you can read this in Judges chapter 6, like I said, we'll come back, but I'm just giving you a brief for the sake of time. The first time he calls to men, he gathers 32,000 men. That's a big army. I know the other opposing army was greater than that, but that's a huge army. And I'm sure they're sharpening swords. It would be cool to be able to go back and just, get a bird's eye view of what was happening. But they're probably sharpening swords and building clubs and doing everything they can. Because to them, victory would mean we got to bring the men. We got to bring the people. And you can even see in the story of Gideon, he keeps asking God for signs. Keep giving me a sign. Are you sure? Are you sure? Look at our army. Keep giving me signs. Let me tell you, and I'll say this again one more time. Let me tell you, if Gideon would have gone out with only the things that men thought would bring victory, there would have been defeat. And like I said, for us, a lot of times we try doing things on our own. We try doing things, I'll just read books about this, or I'll just go to this person because they've dealt with it. And I'm telling you, there's one answer. One answer. Get connected to the one who has offered victory over the enemy. Gideon would have lost the battle if he would have gone in his own strength. And the reason I can tell you that is because if you look at the history of Israel, you can see times where they did it in their own power, their own strength. They tried. We forget you, God. We don't want anything to do with you. We're going back to idols and everything. Let's take this war. Let's take this battle. Boom, defeat happens. Numbers chapter 13. We find, and I know I keep jumping actually further back and back into history, but Numbers chapter 13. We find the story of the Israelites. They send spies into the land that God had promised them. They come to the border, and they send spies in. 12 spies in all. Guess what? 10 of those spies come back and say, no way. We are not going in there because physically it is impossible. It looks impossible. There is nothing we can do to overcome these people. They have walled cities. They have giants in there. Actually, they're probably the descendants of the Nephilim, which is, you can find that earlier in the Bible, but these are giant people. Physically, we cannot take them. They actually said, we want to choose a new leader. Let's get rid of Moses. He led us here saying that God wanted us to come into this, but physically we can tell we cannot overcome this enemy. So let's get rid of Moses. Let's bring a new leader, and actually let's gripe and complain and go back to Egypt. Because at least Egypt, they would fight our battles for us. We were just their slaves. We would eat. We would do all these things. So let's do that. Let's go back to Egypt. Let me tell you, if they would have gone into the promised land like the Lord had told them and offered them victory, victory would have come. But instead, they saw the enemy. They didn't do the proper things before the battle, which is trust in him. And so as a result, they ended up turning away. There was 2 spies that said, we can do this. We can do this. The Lord has promised this land. Does anybody know who they were? Joshua and Caleb. And we'll come back because we'll see Joshua a little bit later as well. Joshua and Caleb. They said, we can do this. The Lord has offered us victory. He has promised it to us. All we have to do is step into that victory. Instead, we keep looking at our outward appearance. We keep looking at the things that we don't have or that we do have, and the men we don't have. And so as a result, Israel decides we're going to succumb to the enemy. We can't take this. We can't do this battle. And for 40 years, they wander in the wilderness. And most of them, there's only a few that were able to even see the promised land because of that decision they made. Defeat happened to those people, except for those who kept, and Joshua and Caleb are amongst those people who were able to still see this promised land because they knew that victory was there, and they were pointing to Israelites saying, God has already promised us victory. Before we go into the battle, let's go to him. And he will tell us, yes, victory is there. Let's walk in that victory. So what brings the victory in our lives? Before we go into battle, we can already choose our outcome. The reason for that is because we choose whether we are going to fight the battle ourselves or whether we are going to lean on the one who has already brought victory over the enemy. And that is God. Jesus Christ in flesh came, offered victory to us, and what our responsibility is to trust in him. Every single day. It's weird. I always, when I'm studying for, I guess I shouldn't say I'm weird, but sometimes I think I'm weird. Whenever I'm studying for a sermon, I always visualize what I'm going to do at certain parts. Am I going to be super passionate and just really drive this point home? Or, am I going to be, stay behind the pulpit and just be safe or whatever? But this is kind of what I thought about when I'm talking about this battle. If we truly realized what was at stake with our kids, with ourselves, with our own salvation, all these things, we would not roll out of bed and say, you know what, before I go to the Lord, I first need to get a cup of coffee. And, since I got my cup of coffee, let me jump in the shower before I go to the Lord. Oh, man, after the shower, now I really just need to get some breakfast, so let me get some breakfast first, and then if I have time, I'll get to the Lord. Oh, now that I had breakfast, I got to get the kids off to school, or I got to get to work, and then, you get to work, and then when I go on my lunch break, oh, but I'm super hungry. Oh, and the day goes on, and then by the end of the day, you're like, well, this is my only free time. And if we truly realized what was at stake, and I was going to play it out for you, but I'd probably crush the microphone. I was going to roll out of bed and fall right to my knees and say, Lord, be with me today. In your power, I want to walk today. The enemy, I already know that as soon as my foot touches, as soon as I am out of bed, the enemy is going to start attacking. He's going to start scheming. He's going to start looking for my weakness. I need to know the importance of walking in his power on a daily basis. If we truly understood what was at stake, you would be jumping out of bed and crying out to God constantly throughout your day. He wouldn't just be another to-do list. He wouldn't just be another if I get to. It would be I have to get to him. I don't care if I miss work. If I have not got to him, I need to get to him. Truly, that would be our heart. That would be our heart's desire. Because the battle is going to be there. I thought about, and it would hurt really bad, but I thought about in Ephesians, which I haven't even got there yet. Let me see when I'm going to get there. Okay. Well, Ephesians chapter 6, Paul talks about the armor of God, and I'm not going to go into it, all of the armor of God, but let me just turn there real quick, and you can actually turn there. Ephesians chapter 6. If I can get there. Ephesians seem to have disappeared from my Bible. Okay, there it is. The armor of God, Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10. Finally, brothers, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Put on the armor of God before you go into battle. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, not your own, not your neighbors, not your dads, not your moms. Okay, I had that tendency when I was young. My dad's been a pastor my whole life, and there's that tendency to rest on what he has done, to just follow the flow. He has been a good man of God, and so they've instilled principles in us, and as long as I follow that, I'll be good. No, I daily have to decide whether I'm going to put on the full armor of God, whether I am going to rest in his mighty power, because guess what? The battle's going on for my dad. The battle's going on for my soul. The battle's going on for your soul. Daily. He's not going to give up just because we had a couple good days in a row and we decided to put on the armor and he couldn't touch us. He's going to keep coming after you. And so that is why Paul says daily we got to carry our cross. Daily we have to die to him. Daily we have to run to him and say, Lord, it is in your strength, it is in your power that we are coming. The enemy is going to be throwing the darts, actually the fiery darts, at us. And a good illustration would have been if I would have had somebody come up here and actually throw a dart in my back, But that would have hurt really, really bad. But I was thinking it would drive the point home. You know, it would hurt. I would scream. I would yell. But when it comes to our spiritual side, sometimes we are just so laxed, and it's like, oh, yeah, I failed this day. Oh, yeah, he got to me that day. He is hitting you with darts. And so before the battle begins, we have to go to the one who offers victory. Don't blame it on God if you are feeling defeated. Don't blame it on God if there are things that you are going through in life that you just feel, I'm giving up, I don't want anything to do, I'm just done. There is nothing on this earth that he cannot walk you through and bring victory in your life. Nothing. No thing. Nothing. Let's go back to the stories and we'll see how these people did it. 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is David and Goliath. 17 verse 38 through 50. And I will read as fast as my little mind can read. Okay? But just listen to what the outcome was. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on the sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch, a shepherd's bag, and a sling in his hand, and approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. The attack is coming every day. It's going to come. Where am I? Okay. He looked David over and saw that he was a little more than a boy, glowing in health and handsome, and despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with the sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give your carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by the sword or the spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. The battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with the sling and the stone, without a sword in his hand, and struck down the Philistine and killed him. Guess what David did before the battle? I am not coming at you with a sword, and I am not coming at you with a shield, and I'm not coming at you with Saul's armor. And yes, I am a boy, but guess what? I have gone to the Lord, and he is going to bring victory. The battle is his. Victory is offered. Judges chapter 7, verse 1 through 22. This is where we are talking about Gideon. Again, he started with 32,000 men. Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into your hands, or Israel will boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. But the Lord said to Gideon, "There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out, but for you there. If I say, 'This one shall go with you,' he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps, and those who kneel down to drink. 300 of them drank from the cupped hands, lapping like dogs. The rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, with 300 men that lapped, I will save you. Excuse me. I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go. Okay. Lord, you must be mistaken. Okay, I started out with a pretty good number of people, 42,000 men. And now I'm down to 300 men. What is going on? Guess what? The Lord was calling Gideon to go to the one who could bring victory, not in himself. Before the battle begins, trust in me for your victory. I'm going to skip down just for the sake of time. Let's go to verse 18. Let's go to verse 16. Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, and torches inside. Watch me, he told them. Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Gideon and 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp, and at the beginning and the middle watch, just after they had changed their guard, they blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew their trumpets and smashed their jars, grasping the torches in their hands and holding in the right hand the trumpets they were to blow. They shouted, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth-shittah towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel-Meholah near to Beth. Okay, those last names, I might have mispronounced them. The moral of the story is, guess what? Get rid of the men. Get rid of your own thinking of how you're going to overcome this victory. In the morning when we wake up, our first response should be, there's a war going on, and I'm going to get on my knees, or I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to go to the one who can bring victory for me today. He's already won the battle. I'm saying that to myself. He's already won the battle. Why do you go a day and get a dart in your neck, from the enemy? He's already won. And in this case, Joshua did exactly what the Lord commanded, and the Lord was the one who caused the men to turn on themselves. Joshua chapter 5, I told you I was going to come back to Joshua as well. Joshua chapter 5, and this one I could read a lot, but I will try to maybe just paraphrase it. Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 through chapter 6, verse 20 is where I was going to read, but let me just give you a little bit of what happened. So Joshua was one of those spies that went into the land and said, the Lord has promised us victory. He has brought us out of Egypt, promised us the land flowing with milk and honey. That is this place right here. We've crossed over to the Jordan River, and there is an enemy that is waiting for us, and we have already won victory. We already have it. All we have to do is trust in what the Lord is calling us to do. So after those 40 years of wandering around in the wilderness, after that time frame, Moses and a bunch of other Israelites pass away. Now, Joshua is coming to the leadership of the Israelites. And guess where he's going back to win the victory? Back to the promised land. Let's go in. We've already promised it. I was one of those scouts that went in with the 12 spies, and I told you from the beginning, we've wasted a lot of time. He already brought us victory. So here, they get up near Jericho, and here's this fortified wall, huge wall. And you have to understand, and you can picture it in your mind, these are slaves that had come out of Egypt. They didn't have these giant slingshots or catapults or, thousands and thousands of chariots and all this. This was a slave community coming out of Egypt. Okay? They probably had some swords and stuff like that. They might have had some clubs, but there was no catapults, no flamethrowers. And they're coming against this huge walled city. I'm not even going to, I'm going to read it. Okay, verse 13. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. This part of the story is interesting to me because part of me wonders, well, why didn't he continue to go on and continue to just talk to him? And my thoughts are Joshua already knew the victory was there. So when the commander of the Lord's army came before him, his response was, "I'm going to take off my sandals. I'm going to get down on my knees because you're here. You showed up just like you promised you would. The Lord is going to fight this battle for us." It wasn't, okay, let's devise a plan and let's, you take them from behind and we'll attack them from the front. And no, it was take off your sandals. This battle is the Lord's. Oh man, I'll just gonna have like 3 hours of preaching. So again, I told you I went to war this week and it was good. Joshua fell face down. Let's see. What message does your have? Take off your sandals, for this place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went in and out. No one came in. When the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and the fighting men. March around the city once with all the army's men. Do this 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets and ram's horns at the front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing their trumpets. When you hear them sound the loud blast on the trumpets, have the whole army of the Lord shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in." For the sake of time, guess what Joshua does? Exactly what the Lord commands him to do. They march around the wall. At the end of their time, they blow their trumpets and they all shout. And these huge walls, some saying 3-4 stories high, collapse. Able to rush right in, take over the army, done. Okay. To the physical mind, the Israelites had already gone through this process. It's not doable. They're giants. They have fortified cities. The land devours men. I mean, you go back in Numbers, and that's what it says. These men were scared. The battle is not theirs. The victory was not theirs in the first place. The army of God had already won it. So that's exactly what they do. The walls come down. Victory was given to them because they chose to do what the Lord had told them to do. Sometimes I ask myself, and worship team, if you will come back up, I actually was thinking that desert song was, all the songs were good, but that desert song one was, sometimes I ask myself how I ever allow battles, knowing this information, knowing the one who I serve, knowing that victory is already offered to me, regardless of what the enemy throws my way. Okay? It may be a dart to try getting to you. It may be a catapult. You may think it's a catapult. You may think whatever he is throwing your way. I am telling you, the Lord has already offered victory if we go to him before the battle. So my encouragement to you this morning is, if you're not a morning person, I understand that. Okay? There's times where I am and there's times where I'm not. If you're not a morning person, regardless of when you wake up, go to him first. Walk in his strength and in his power and see if victory does not start coming because of him. And the reason that in Gideon's situation the Lord kept getting rid of men is so that we can't boast. It wasn't Gideon who did this. It was just a choice that they chose. I will follow the Lord. Every one of us now that heard this, and I know you've been hearing this type sermon all along, every one of us know that we are at war now. Every day there's an enemy that wants to take you out. And now every one of us knows the answer, that before the battle happens, you need to get connected to him. You need to get on your knees with him. You need to walk in his strength, in his power, putting on the armor of God in Ephesians chapter 6. You can read about that. Victory is available regardless of what you're going through. The choice truly is yours. It's mine. It's all of ours. Are we going to have victory this week, this month, this year? My prayer is that we do. So as they sing this song, the altars are open. If you want to come and put on the armor, if you want to come and ask for repentance and just cry out to God and say, Lord, I did this on my own and it's not working. I need to walk in your victory. Help me to do this. And I'm telling you, when we realize what is at stake, we will be jumping out of bed going to him. So, again, the altars are available. When they're done with this first song, you are free to go, but please just be mindful if there are people up here. But each day, walk in victory that is made available to you through Jesus Christ. Nothing that we do. It's not the swords that we pick up. It's who we go to, and that is Jesus Christ. So, amen. Lord, I thank you so much that you have already offered us victory. It is a choice on our part each day whether we walk in your victory. Thank you for that opportunity. I just pray that each one of us in this room would choose that daily. In your name I pray.